So since this channel will be discussing sovereign pride, I decided to make a video discussing the secession of the Southern States in 1861. This event heavily influenced the Southern States historically, socially, and economically even to this day. Now, many Americans have actually heard of the war from 1861 to 1865, though for many different reasons. The Civil War, the War of Secession, the War of Northern Aggression, Lincoln's War, the Brothers' War, the War of Yankee Aggression, etc. However, the same thing that everyone can agree on is that the Southern States left the Union in 1861. Precisely, the date was actually February 4th, 1861. But the reason as to why the South left has sparked many debates. This video will actually be discussing why the South claimed to left and the legality behind the reasonings. Many people actually argue that the South did not have the right to leave the Union, because it was stated in the Constitution that no state is allowed to leave. This really isn't the case. Not once in the entire Constitution of the United States is actually mentioned this, not even in Article 1, Section 10. The specific section in the Constitution talking about what a state is allowed and not allowed to do. Moreover, when you read the Declaration of Independence, it even states that certain areas are allowed to leave if they believe the government is not working, or they're even allowed to disband the current government in place. For example, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with one another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station in which laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted amongst men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, so that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles, and organizing its powers in such form, as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Now, at first sight, this is really complex unless you're well read. So in simpler forms, it becomes necessary for people to dissolve political bonds and assume the powers upon earth. They're given certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, and happiness, and to secure these, governments were created by the people themselves. Whenever any form of government becomes self-destructive, the people have the right to abolish it and institute a new government. One of the Confederacy's main arguments for leaving the Union was lack of representation, as said by the Confederate President Jefferson Davis along with his Vice President. It basically states that the North had a higher population, and under the Constitution at that time, the higher your population, the more say your state has, as of today. Every law passed therefore benefited the northern states, so the South eventually got fed up with no representation, which ironically was what America actually fought for independence 84 years prior, and just left the Union. So if you look at the demographics prior to the war during the 1850s, yeah, the North had a higher population. According to the U.S. Census in 1860, there was approximately 32 million people living within the United States. Approximately 23 million were in the 22 northern states at the time, and 9 million in the 11 southern states. Of the South, 3,500,000 were actually slaves. Now, the reason I'm mentioning slaves was at the time they weren't really considered citizens under both U.S. nor Confederate law, bringing the total Confederate citizen population to about 5.5 million. That's almost 1/5 of the North's total population. The reason why the North had a higher population, though, was because they actually had more of a job market. They had factories, they had shipping ports, railroads, steel, gold, and coal mines. A lot more than what was actually located within the South. The South at the time was more agricultural based, most of their product actually going to European textile industries in Europe, mainly England and France. Now, the South also had factories, ports, and railroads, but they had a lot less than what was located in northern states. For example, I know a lot of people are more visual than numerical, so here is a map of from the U.S. Census during 1850, and here is the other map from 1870, shortly after the Civil War, and the darker color represents higher population. Now, the reason that they actually left was because, according to them, they had no say in the Union government. The clauses, consent of the governed, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and that the U.S. had a, quote, destructive, end quote, government. In other words, they were being destructive toward the sovereign way of life and tradition, do help show the beginnings of a legal basis for the Confederate States of America. The fact that there was and is nowhere in the Constitution that states a state cannot leave the Union is another legal point in their argument. In the eyes of the Confederate States of America, the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, and certain European countries, i.e. England and France, which sent military and economic aid to the Confederate States, however, never officially recognized them, the Confederacy is 100% legal, despite certain things they were doing, such as slavery, which many Southerners were actually against at the time.